Dena asked, what makes a fiddler an intermediate player or a beginner player? What is the criteria or skills to be considered? And so that's a good question. I think it's confusing sometimes. Like, am I a beginner? Where should I be? And the simple answer that I give, and it's somewhat of philosophy answer, is that you always try to approach things as a beginner. You're always learning, and don't be like, just be humble as you go through this. Like, I always try to just be like, how can I learn this? So that's not the answer you guys are looking for, but it's just something to keep in mind, that to not worry so much about what your rank is, how far you should be, just be curious about learning and where you're at. So, but now again, to more like of an actual answer to the question. So it is somewhat arbitrary. At what point do you go from a beginner to an intermediate? Different teachers and fiddlers would say different things. So I just have a very general, totally arbitrary definition point. But if you look at my course, there's certain skills you have that once you have them, I sort of see you as crossing into an intermediate zone. And so the skills for it to be the kind of the beginner skills to learn before being at an intermediate level, particularly for my course, is you want to know the basic fingerings. So it's first, second, third, and low second. You want to be able to slur notes, slur 2. You want to be able to slur 4 and slur 2 separate 2. Which, by the way, makes hoedown. Long, short, short, long, short, short. You want to be able to play some scales. So you want to be able to play the basic D major scale. Be able to play it out without reading, just in your sleep. Just be able to play it on automatic pilot. And then by the same token, the G scale and the A major scale. Then there's a few other scales I would throw in. The minor scales or Dorian mode scales. So starting on D, and basically it's like D major, but you play low second. That would be D Dorian. Finally, I would say no, the G major scale upper octave, which starts D3 and uses A low 2, C natural, not C sharp. All right, so those are the basic scales I think really that you would want to know as before being considered an intermediate. Those are like beginner things. And finally, I would say learn about 30 tunes. Total just random number, but at that point, you're kind of safely, you've played enough, you know how the process works, that you can maybe start to think of yourself as intermediate. But again, and then in the intermediate part of my course, the things that I sort of consider part of that realm are learning fourth finger, starting on the E, of course, which is easier, and then A, and then it gets progressively harder on other strings. Learning the low first. So on the E string, that's F natural. Learning the other major finger positions, be low fourth. So low fourth is next to third, and then learning raised third, which is the same note as low fourth. It's just sometimes you would want to use that instead of low fourth, without getting into the weeds on that. Finally, in the intermediate course, I would say the double stops are a big thing. And double stops are like going back to the idea of being a beginner. When you play double stops, when you first learn it, it's like learning to play again. It's like learning to bow again. That's why I encourage beginner mindset, because you have to go back to just single notes on open strings. But anyway, double stops and just slowly being able to play them with more fingers is part of the intermediate fiddler's journey. And along with that comes playing simple chords and chord progressions. And eventually adding them to tunes. So that's all part of the intermediate realm, okay? And the very last thing that I teach in this realm of the intermediate level is the chromatic scale, which, has anybody learned the chromatic scale out there? Okay, good. So the chromatic scale is just a simple way to look at it is you're playing every note in Western harmony. So you're playing half steps all the way up. So D, low one, low two, three. There is only one chromatic scale. It's all one big scale. There's no tonal center. So I'm not going to really get into a lesson on the chromatic scale. I almost did, but basically those are the kind of the things that I consider more in the intermediate realm. And then moving beyond that would be adding more complex variation like Irish variation, or more intense like old time bowings like circular bowing. And just old Orange Blossom Special, kind of a old time bluegrass thing, like those are starting to get into other realms. But again, all those things, when you first learn them, you approach it as a beginner. So just to drive that point home, like always just coming out as a beginner. And another way to look at playing as a beginner is like each practice session you start as a beginner and you get a little bit better in it. I tend to start my practice sessions with open, just long notes. Just as sometimes just an open string, just getting into the sound, enjoying it, and then just some scales to simple tunes and scales to warm up my hands. I'm like really a beginner at the beginning of a practice session. Okay, so that was Dena's question. I'm gonna move on unless somebody has a follow-up or question about being an intermediate versus beginner player. Dan does. Okay, Dan, unmute yourself and let's hear you.
Regarding the learning the 30 tunes more or less, it's easy just to learn. I wonder what learn means. I can learn the melody and I can play it. I can have music in front of me, and I probably for a certain length of time can play it from memory. But if I go on to something else and somebody says, "Okay, can you play Whiskey Before Breakfast?" I have to go, I don't know. What does it sound like? I don't remember. And even when I remember, when it comes back to my memory, I can fudge my way through it, but I wouldn't say that I know it. So it's hard for me to keep any kind of repertoire because I just am unable to play so few tunes from just cold on the spot.
So that's a whole other question, and I'm just going to answer it. So there's things you can practice in order to be able to all the tunes in your repertoire. There's strategies, and it would involve focusing on that to some degree, but basically you develop a system for reviewing tunes and for recalling them. So it's almost like you can almost use a flashcard system or a cheat sheet system, but you could, like, I don't know how much do you practice a day?
Hours.
So you could
Several
build
hours
it
a day.
every day. You should devote
But
time.
I do more than one instrument, but it's the same issue on all of them.
So you need to build in time to review a tune, and I'm developing a whole thing on this, but to return to tunes in a timely manner so that you remember them. So basically you spend time every time you practice reviewing something, and then maybe go over it again a day later. If you still got it that day, then let it go and review something else. But then you'll have, in order to remember it, you're going to have to come back to it a week. Like that's the spaced repetition of it. So you could start with I recommend kind of coming up with a review set.
I
And
know there's a system called Anki, which is that spaced repetition thing you were referring to. And if it comes easy, then it gets pushed farther back in the file. If you struggle with it, it'll come up the next day or so.
that's right. You said it. Yeah, and it's used the spaced repetition concept is used in all kinds of learning strategy. Like Duolingo, the language learning app, uses it. You know, you learn you learn, and if you get a word right, then you may not get asked that question for a week. If you get it wrong, then you'll get asked the next day, and then if you get it right, it'll be pushed back a week. So it's a bit much for me to go into a full system on how to do that, but I'm working on I have my own system, and I'm working on a way of sharing that. But basically, like one idea that just pops into mind is some kind of like flashcard system, or develop a deck of cards, like index cards, have all the pieces and tunes, and kind of categorize them by, these are things I'm trying to like fire up again. You have like, and don't overdo it with one, you know, have a small set, like maybe five cards that you really want to hit up now. And then once you feel good about those, like let them go and pick 5 new ones. But you have to kind of develop some system to return to those a little bit later, and to constantly. And then another great technique, have you tried the fingerprinting thing that I teach? The fingerprinting
I
idea?
guess I missed that.
Okay, so this is going to help you a lot. So whenever you play a piece, let's say you played Whiskey Before Breakfast. Let's walk through it. So you play the whole tune, play the whole tune. And we're going to seal it in the brain by playing a little snippet of the beginning of the A, and then of the B. So you'll say out loud, Whiskey Before Breakfast, A part. Whiskey Before Breakfast, B part. And then you move on, you do something else in your practice, and then just following the spaced repetition idea that you mentioned, you would play the fingerprint at the end of the practice. So you've done all this other stuff. At the end of the practice, you'd be like, let's see what I worked on Whiskey Before Breakfast. Can I play its fingerprint? Whiskey Before Breakfast. B part. So that's going to help. A lot of times you might find that if you get one little part of a tune, the rest comes. And if not, then it means you need to put more review work into the whole thing. There's kind of 2 problems. You know, so one is simply recalling it, which the fingerprinting is good for. And then another is like, how well do you know it? Maybe you just need to learn it more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Another idea I have for you is, how do you listen to music? Do you listen to CDs, or do you have a Spotify or YouTube or anything?
I I just listen to the tunes that I either am learning or have learned.
But what format do you use? What?
It's all on my computer, MP3s, or I may look it up on YouTube. Or I mean, sometimes I get some obscure ones like "Breaking Up Christmas" that I have to go looking for. You know.
Yeah. So make very specific playlists on your iTunes, or if you have Spotify, or if you listen to music on YouTube, make playlists. They can be temporary, but like, this is what I'm practicing this month. And then you go and you listen to them, you know, when you're not even playing, you're just constantly returning to the practice that way.
Sure, sure.
And just creating a really clear mental picture of the tune.
Gotcha.
So try that. Try to put, and I'm going to work on some kind of like analog thing, like system with note cards. I use a note-taking program which has spaced repetition built into it called Roam. But I've been thinking about ways to teach this so that anybody could do it, you know, analog or digital, have a way to return to things that are, yeah. So, okay, well, thanks for your question.
Go to FiddleHed.com for a progressive, step-by-step course outline, color-coded tabs, play-along tracks, sheet music, and much more. Thanks for watching the video. Excellent! And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.